but at least in modern history, one of the most tumultuous times I think the United States has been in. I'm a big believer that strong American leadership leads to a more secure world. Now, that doesn't mean we put troops everywhere, but it means when America is strong, when America is engaged, that the world responds. They look for leadership. I see 4 or 5 options right now in terms of who leads the world. It's either the United States of America, it's either China, it's either Russia, it's either terrorism, or it's chaos. Right now, the United States, from what I've seen, has been backing away from the world. And something has to follow. And unfortunately, that's been chaos. So I look at the situation with Egypt, and you had a guy who was elected, was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is not a fan of the United States, and it's not a fan of Israel. It's not a fan of, frankly, any peace-loving folks. The president was elected, and I'll say legally and fairly. But then he comes in and he basically tears up the Constitution of Egypt and rewrites it, setting himself up for a Chavez or a dictatorial type regime. We saw this coming. Now, we didn't do anything. The people of Egypt said, we did not vote for a president to come in and throw out our Constitution. And they rioted in the streets, like they did in Tahrir Square under Mubarak. The military overthrew Mubarak. Now the military sensed the will of the people of Egypt, and with a coalition of all opposition leaders behind him, stood in front and said, we are deposing this president, and we're going to immediately lead to new elections. Now, I will say this. Most people don't realize this, by the way, but foreign aid is less than 1% of the federal budget. It's actually pretty minute. Minute? Whatever, that word. Right.
Second thing you got.
Yeah, there you go, thanks. Secondly, most of our aid actually goes to Israel. And foreign aid that's given out, there's a requirement that 100% of it, with the exception of Israel, they have a 75% waiver, 100% of that actually be spent in the United States of America on American goods. So if money is given to a country, they have to buy American products with it. They can't go to Russia, they can't go to China, and things like that. I believe that we have to watch the situation in Egypt. If the military does not begin the process when it's reasonable to do so, does not begin the process of transitioning to elections, then we have that conversation. But right now, the force that fights for moderation in Egypt has always been the Egyptian military. They're very highly respected. They respect the treaty with Israel, the peace accords with Israel. And if the United States pulls the aid away now, you send a message to the people of Egypt that the United States is not backing the transition there. You've weakened the Egyptian military, and I think you make it all that much more likely that civil war and chaos ensue. And I understand your position in this is our money, and we need to be very careful with it. And I agree. That's why I supported cutting aid at least in half to Pakistan. They don't work with us, and when they harbor bin Laden. But the reality is, some cases, foreign aid makes war less likely and saves us a lot of money, i.e. Israel. Sir, in the back.
Hi, my name is Drew. Despite the long hair, I am a Republican.
And you're a Hawkeyes fan.
I'm glad you're here, man. Going back to the Obamacare question, you said you voted to repeal it 38 times, but the Republicans really haven't offered, or at least coalesced around a real solid alternative program. There's been a lot of different programs offered, really solid ones by Republicans, but Tom Price from Georgia, and Charles Boutsani from Louisiana, both medical doctors. So, it's not like Republicans don't have good ideas about alternatives to the Affordable Care Act. It's just that there doesn't seem to be any kind of universal thing saying hey, we don't like Obamacare, right, but here's our bill, right, that we're going to go and gather around. And so, I think most of us like some features in Obamacare, even though those of us on the right, people like the whole denying people from pre-existing conditions and stuff like that. But, you understand what the problem is. So I guess my question to you is there a specific legislation, bills that have been proposed by some of these legislators that I, talked about in the past, or something else that, you would, like to see presented as a meaningful alternative? Or are you one of these guys that Boehner seems to be saying, well, we're just going to, start a new bill from scratch and debate about it for another 2 years, which makes moderates and undecided voters kind of unhappy?
No, I understand, and look, I'm of the belief that we should have an alternative bill out there. It's something Tom Price does, I don't know his bill number, Charles Bustani, there's a doc caucus, we have a bunch of doctors in our party, and they came together, kind of came up with some alternatives. Probably the best alternative I can give you is House Bill 3400, which was actually the Republican alternative put up when the health care bill was actually being debated. I'll tell you my principles in general here, and because I agree, look, you guys know the Domino's pizza commercial where they say, hey, look, we get it. Send us a picture of our crappy pizza or tell us, when we've messed up, right? The one thing I will be very happy to admit is the Republican Party does not always do a good job messaging, right? The Republican Party and people in the Republican Party have a heart and have compassion, but we don't always do a good job of communicating that. That's something that I want to change, by the way, because I think it's important. Ronald Reagan was one of the more compassionate guys you'll ever meet. He had a heart for people, and he communicated that heart, and that's why he won in 1980, and that's why he won re-election. On health care, here's the issue. Both sides agree on something. Health care costs too much money, and not enough people have access to affordable health care coverage. Both sides agree on that. Let's start there. The difference is, with what you have with the health care bill, the Obamacare bill, is you actually had basically government, in essence, writing just a big check to cover the cost of it. What we believe, and in the process, in order to pay for some of that, the government is reimbursing less and less. They cut $760 billion out of Medicare, which was what the gentleman over here referred to. And so doctors now are getting reimbursed less. They're seeing more and more patients. Less doctors are taking Medicare, and Medicare, frighteningly, will become Medicaid, which is difficult. It's hard to find a doctor who takes Medicaid now. So my quick principles are this. Number one, we have to bring the cost of health care down, and I think we can do it through opening up state lines to allow insurance to compete across state lines so they can't pay CEOs $10 million because now they have to compete with another health insurance company, and so in doing so, now they have to cut their costs. If I call Blue Cross Blue Shield and I say, I'm just using it as an example, and I say, hey, I need some help, and I go through the litany of press 1, press 9, press 8, now you're back at the beginning. I may switch to a different insurance company, and Blue Cross now starts losing customers, and they say, well, we got to do something right, so they begin to improve their quality of customer service. They begin to reimburse their CEO less. They find ways to do that. So cross-state competition is important. I think you have to have tort reform and medical malpractice. I think if you're malpracticed on, you should obviously have a way to get compensated for that and to be able to sue. But we don't want out of control sue somebody for $3 million for spilling hot coffee stuff anymore. Because what that does is causes doctors to practice defensively. So if I come in and I have a pain in my elbow and I tell the doctor I fell on it, he may actually put me through an entire MRI, or I don't know if it's an MRI that would tell this, I'm not a big medical knowledge guy, but he may put me through something to see if I have a blood clot maybe that's giving me that, even though he knows that I don't. It's not his fault. The fault is that he knows if he just happens to miss something, he's going to be sued to death. And if he doesn't do that, and if he does that, then insurance will cover it. And here's another thing. How about when you walk into a hospital, you know how much this is going to cost you from the front. If you're going to get an MRI, you know how much that's going to cost your insurance company. Maybe it gives you an opportunity to shop around and price competitively. There's a whole bunch of things we can do to bring the cost down and keep the quality there. And then I believe you look at people that truly can't afford insurance and can't afford coverage, and you find a way for the government to help them on a sliding scale for a limited time basis. But you can do that at a fraction of the cost and maintain this great healthcare system that we have, but also expanding coverage to those that would love to have health insurance. Sir?
Two questions, okay, and the second one was suggested by some earlier discussion. First one, okay, I went to the town hall meeting that you and Don had, and one of the questions was, well, are you going to start over to Obamacare? We're going to defund it. Well, you might not have chopped all of its heads off, or you haven't chopped all of its heads off, and the ones that are left are already destroying the economy. The private sector is, in the government, is getting ready for huge premium increases, and to activate contingencies with the smaller businesses, say under 30 full-time equivalent employees.
Yeah, it's an FTE is 30 hours, not 40 hours. You need people to make basically work 29 hours.
So can I just not have to worry worry about it, that Boehner and you guys are going to take care of this?
Well, you know what, if we had the Senate and the presidency, you would have,
But we
no,
don't have
but
the
there's,
Senate and the President.
here's the problem, so.
In 2 years, we
I,
will.
I understand that people are upset, and I'm upset too, but there's the Constitution which says to pass a bill, and we all understand that, you're not gonna pass a repeal bill, because Harry Reid doesn't wanna take it up, it's not gonna happen. So how do you defund it? Well, you can say, hey, look, at the end of September, the federal government is out of budget authority, we have to pass a continuing resolution to have money to spend. We're just not gonna fund it, even though it's the law of the land, by the way. Even if I disagree with it, it's still the law of the land. This was signed by the President of the United States, Constitution, it's the law of the land. We say we don't wanna fund it, and then what happens? We go into a budget showdown, we shut down the federal government, which, by the way, some people say, fine, shut down the federal government. It means people aren't gonna get their Social Security checks. Well, then I guess we can go and we can sign something that says people get their Social Security checks. It means people aren't gonna get Medicare paid. Well, I guess we could go back and sign that. It means soldiers aren't gonna get money. It means that people are gonna lose confidence in the economy. It means all this. So a showdown, and by the way, if you think that the Republican Party is gonna win the messaging war when the government's shut down, and the president gets every news camera and says the Republicans shut down the government, we're gonna get destroyed. And so what can we do? Well, we're delaying the implementation a year. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. The administration said it, and so our hope is that eventually, the American people, 52% of them still oppose the law, so.
The second one, you were talking about the road transfer, you learned that heroin was cheaper than marijuana. I didn't know that. My wife, who's a high school teacher, told me that there's a lot of very high quality heroin available all over the place.
There is.
Heroin that kid takes it once and they're hooked. And that is one of the things that's made possible by the open border. I'm talking about not having a fence across the desert. I'm talking about the 40 and 80 foot wide asphalt pathways into the country for these goods. And
You're talking about interstates coming.
yeah, interstates. And I would assert to you that the border is not closed until that form of commerce has been cut off, until all of the jobs that are being taken by people who are here illegally, trespassers, overstayed visa, what have you, are taken, are opened up, and people who are chronically unemployed are helped to get back into a habit of going to work again.
Well, I appreciate your perspective, and I'll tell you, drugs crossing the border through the interstate is a huge issue. Technology's gotten better, being able to scan vehicles coming through and being able to tell where there's drugs hidden. And frankly, ultimately, this is just tragedy. I mean, the whole idea of our kids having access to heroin, having access to marijuana and all these drugs. And you know what? We've got to have a real grown-up conversation. The culture of, certain kinds of music and certain kinds of entertainment makes it look cool. In fact, some of these kids I was talking to said, it's peer pressure and it's what we saw in society, and I wanted to do it. Okay, who's had their hand up the longest already? Okay, yes.
Hi, I'm Arliss Mills, retired educator, and I am for a pathway to citizenship for the people that are here. But I have concerns about the H-1B visas, which Bill Gates and a bunch of his cronies are pushing. Oh, we need to bring in all this talent from Europe. My son works for one of these companies. Their CEO makes $25 million a year, and this company lets a few people go every couple months, and they replace them with people that they contracted IBM for. And these people are coming in on those visas. Oh, we've got to have them. We don't have, there's a shortage of skilled labor. I'm sorry, they laid off people and they're replacing them. So when Bill Gates and his friends are talking to you, think about the workers here.
I've never talked to Bill Gates.
We have a lot, I get very upset as an educator, so I feel like it's a slap in the face when they say we don't have the skilled labor force here. We have intelligent children. We have intelligent graduates who are looking for jobs. We have people in their 50s who've been laid off, engineers and computer programmers who have these skills, but they want to bring somebody over here on one of those visas because they can pay them less. Now, I have a suggestion that any corporation that hires a person on one of those visas be required to fund the training for one of their employees to be able to take get that job within the next 3 years.
Well, it's interesting. Well, I thank you for bringing that up, and that's a big area. By the way, thank you for being an educator. As the son of a public school teacher, I know how hard you guys actually work, and I know how many times you would end up paying for things for kids out of your own pocket, and you can write off a whole $250 a year, and that's it. And so thank you for doing it. But let me say, I will tell you, as the Rockford area is very impressive in terms of what you guys are doing with education. Obviously, we all know this is a manufacturing-intense area. There are great manufacturing jobs here. Manufacturing is the biggest driver of the middle class, by the way, so part of the reason for disappearing middle class is disappearing manufacturing. The two are correlated. And so I want to ensure that we can do everything we can to match. In fact, I will be passing soon out of the House the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act of 2013, which is a long title, that basically helps us figure out what we can do better for manufacturing. But you're right, there are a lot of open jobs, and in some cases there aren't the people with the skill set to do it. One of the things Rockford area has done very well is they're starting to, what's that?
That's not what I said. I said there are people with this skill.
No, okay, well, okay, for some reason there are jobs that are going unfilled, and so if that's in the area, then here's what you gotta do. You've gotta take somebody, I think, that's a sophomore or junior in college, and show them that manufacturing is an opportunity. It's not like it was in the Industrial Revolution anymore. It's a good, high-paying job, and you're gonna see young people then that are turned on to the idea of going and working in manufacturing, so I think it'll be great. Back here, sir.
Is the concept of a flat tax going to get any traction, and where would you stand on coming out of the House of a flat tax, even tax?
No, there's probably not much of a chance of it, I'll be honest with you. But what we do want to do is tax reform, which is, like, let's get rid of a lot of the loopholes and deductions, except for the big ones like charitable giving and, like, home mortgage interest deduction. Those are important. But get rid of some of the loopholes and then bring the overall rate down for everybody, so that on the corporate side, for instance, a small manufacturer that pays the full corporate tax rate because they can't hire the lawyers and accountants to find ways to move money. They do it legally, by the way, but they have tons of brain power, so if we move money here, we can do this. They now get a tax break, and those companies that are able to move that money around and find those deductions now have to pay a fair tax for everybody. And you do the same thing on the individual level, so where basically you can do your taxes. It doesn't take, if you're lucky, TurboTax. You can use TurboTax, and it still takes forever because of all this stuff. But giving everybody a break to be able to provide for their family. I do think there's traction on tax reform. Just honestly, I don't see it happening in the form of a flat tax. Back here, sir.
Just for the record, my grandparents waited 10 years for the papers to come to this country in the early 1900s. My point was, you talking about foreign relations and giving countries the ability to buy our products, etc. How does the DOD get away with buying 30 Russian helicopters for the Afghans and spending $600 million?
Yeah.
And while we've got people out of work in aviation.
No, that's a good point. I agree with you. I signed a letter basically questioning that decision. It's stupid that your money's going to buy Russian helicopters. But I'll tell you their reasoning for it, and I'll say that to say I don't agree with it, but their reasoning is because they're cheap to maintain, there's all kinds of spare parts in Afghanistan, and you're dealing with an Afghan military that, by the way, an Afghan military that knows those helicopters already, besides giving them a Black Hawk, which is a very technologically advanced helicopter. Let me say that, and I disagree with that, but let me say this. Did you know that 60% of Afghan people are under the age of 20? There's actually a huge movement called Civil Society Afghanistan where they are turning against the Taliban in huge numbers. Every province now is run by the Afghan government with the help of the United States. Our goal is to be able to back away and let them take control. And the Taliban approval rating in Afghanistan is 10%. That's almost as bad as Congress. So, but that said, I know everybody's fatigued of Afghanistan. I am too. I've been there. I want to leave, but I want to leave under a condition of an Afghan people victory. And sometimes people need to hear the good news associated with it. Hey.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Okay. Sorry, everybody.
My name is Teresa, and I don't agree with most of your positions, and that's fine. But I've been a little offended by saying let's act like grown-ups. So I'm gonna bring out a fact that you stated, and that was that it's been decades since we had a balanced budget. And I would just like to point out that according to factcheck.com with CNN, that it was with President Clinton in 2001. And so it hasn't been decades, it's been slightly over 10 years.
Okay,
And it was,
a decade.
but you said decades, which would assume over 20 years, multiple,
Okay.
okay?
I think we all knew the last time there was a balanced budget was
Well,
in
then,
1990s.
okay. Well, I would just like to comment that it's been wars, and you've talked multiple times about getting our defense and everything else, and I just like to say, there's people in Rockford, everywhere, that need help, and we're talking about 46 million for defending a border that is non-existent. It's just crazy that we're worried about a border, but we're not worried about our people. Our people that need education, that need a bill that drops that interest rate on student loans and immigration.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because the House passed the lower interest rate, we're waiting on action in the Senate. So hopefully Harry Reid will take that up, and we passed the bill that President Obama actually wanted us to pass, so, which will bring the interest rates down. So I'd love, that would be a great area of bipartisanship to bring those interest rates down. So hopefully you'll send a nice letter to Harry Reid and tell him to bring that up. And then, sir, you, and then I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Thank you, Congressman, for the discussion tonight. I actually want to address something with your experience on the Commerce Committee, but in timely events last week, in your conference passed House Resolution 2642, also the Farm Bill. And one of the things that the Republican side of the House has come under a lot of scrutiny for is separating the Farm Bill from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP or food stamps. And I think both sides of the aisle agree that SNAP needs to be reformed. There is a large problem with obesity in this country right now. Specific, and also definitely here at home in Rockford.
By the way, Illinois is the last state to require physical education, just so you know. So that's part of it.
A recent study showed that Rockford is actually the fourth most obese city in the country. One of the things that studies have shown are related to that is living in a food desert. And along those lines, if we keep the trigger on that going, one of the things that helps people escape from food deserts is the supplemental nutrition program. So moving forward now, what are some of the things that you want to see? What are some problems right now facing that program? And what are some things that we can do to help reform it to move forward and make it better for everybody?
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, the reality is when it came to the Farm Bill, I voted for the one that had them together, had reforms in food stamps, which I think are important to include proving eligibility. Right now, you have this issue where if you're eligible for Medicaid, you're automatically enrolled in food stamps instead of proving separate eligibility. You had what they call the lottery winner loophole, is kind of a cute little thing, but there was a lady who won the lottery, $100 million, and was going down and getting her food stamps because technically she wasn't making the money, but she was a millionaire. So those are kind of the things that we wanted to reform, and I think that makes sense. Look, the reality is we couldn't get it through the House of Representatives. It didn't make it through. So we ended up passing the thing that could, which was the farm portion of it. I supported that. That gets rid of direct payments to farmers, by the way. It's a big deal. Takes crop insurance and makes it, it keeps crop insurance there, which farmers pay into and provides them for cases like last year when there was the huge drought and stuff. But in terms of SNAP itself, so my point is this is going to go to conference and it'll get married up with something. But that said, I agree with you. I actually share your concern in terms of people eating healthy, in terms of obesity. What's the answer to reforming food stamps for food deserts? To be honest with you, I can't tell you I have an answer to that. But I can tell you I share your concern in terms of I want to see people eat healthier. I want to see people get out and be active. Because I think even outside of just living a better lifestyle, like I'm physically active. I run a lot. I work out and everything. But it makes you feel better. But the amount of medical expenses that we're spending in this country on diseases that are preventable is huge. I think it's 75% of the top diseases are preventable. And so people can live healthier. It actually brings the cost of medicine down in this country. But Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this. I honestly deeply appreciate you coming out. I know some of you are going to leave here and you're like, I hate that Kinzinger, he's such a whatever. But that's a great thing about our country is, we have elections every 2 years and we pick our representatives. And so I want to say thank you for your opportunity for coming out. I want to say thank you for being part of this. We live in the greatest country in the world. Let me give you an example of that. You have young men and women every day, whether you agree or disagree with the wars, that are still willing to sign on the dotted line to say, I'm willing to put my life on the line for my country, in a country that they were 7 years old when 9/11 happened, a country they barely know. So I want to say thank you all. God bless you.